Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Q&A. Today, as you can tell from the thumbnail and title of the video, and as promised in prior Q&As, I'll be talking all about how to moisturize the face and addressing your most frequently asked questions with regards to moisturizing the face and facial moisturizers. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Andrea. I'm a dermatologist. I film day in the life of a dermatologist vlogs, as well as a lot of sit-down skincare product reviews where I go over ingredients in many hyped skincare products. And then every Friday I do a Q&A on a skincare topic that is of high interest within the comments section of my channel. So if this type of content is of interest to you, I encourage you to stick around for more. So one of the most frequently asked questions that I get on the channel is sometimes with regard to a little bit of confusion between differences in moisturizing at nighttime and differences moisturizing in the daytime. And for me, the difference is pretty simple, okay? In that for the daytime, your moisturizer, the moisturizing product that you select, should include a broad spectrum SPF 30 or higher sunscreen to protect you from UV rays throughout the day that are damaging to the skin and set the stage for skin cancers as well as aging of the skin. And the moisturizer with the sunscreen needs to be one that you like enough that you feel comfortable reapplying throughout the day, okay? Because sunscreens, regardless of the claim on the label, regardless of the type, whether they be mineral or chemical or combination sunscreens, if you're confused about these, by the way, I have a whole 3-part Q&A series on sunscreen ingredients. However, as I was saying, you need to find a moisturizing sunscreen that you feel comfortable reapplying throughout the day because any sunscreen, regardless of the claim, it needs to be reapplied every 2 hours while you're outdoors for sure, or at least periodically throughout the day when you're not. Even when you're inside most of the day, not in front of a window, you still need to reapply. A, because it's a habit that you need to form, and B, because you need to be prepared in case something happens, you have to run outside. It's just having that reassurance that your skin is protected. You don't necessarily remove the behavior when the risk is low, so I would encourage you to think about sunscreen in that manner. You don't stop the behavior simply because you're in a low risk period. You kind of just continue to do it because it's a behavior and a habit. Brushing your teeth is sort of similar. The focus of the nighttime moisturizer would be a basic moisturizer that does not contain sunscreen to give your skin a little break from the sunscreen filters, which you have at the end of the day washed off, as I've talked about in my nighttime skincare routines. The second most frequently asked question that I get on here, and a topic that generates a lot of, I think, distress for people, is can I recommend a sunscreen for oily skin or acne-prone skin that will not break you out? And the answer is straight up no, okay? It's very difficult to predict with any 100% guarantee that a particular, whether it be sunscreen, moisturizer, or whatever facial product, will not break somebody out, okay? And the beauty industry hypes up comedogenic ratings that they kind of generate. There is a lot of talk about pore clogging ingredients, and I will just underscore to everyone here that is largely unsubstantiated in any real clinical objective measure in terms of pore clogging, okay? The jury's still out on that, and it's simply not clear, okay? And it seems to be very individualized. The other reason why I always have tongue-in-cheek with people stating that a particular product, quote, broke them out, is that in my experience, break me out can mean one of 1,000 things, very few of which actually end up being acne or any sort of pore-related concern. Okay, a classic example is an irritant contact dermatitis to a particular product that can look like acne or little pimples. Another example is if somebody has a pre-existing rosacea. Rosacea can look like acne, and a particular product can flare rosacea. And a third example would be allergic contact dermatitis, in which the individual has a sensitivity to one of any of 1,000 ingredients in that particular product that has flared a skin rash that the individual perceives to be breaking them out or related to acne, when in fact it's something entirely different from a biological mechanism. The products that I recommend, I list down in the description box below as far as moisturizers with sunscreen for the daytime and moisturizers for nighttime. They are very low risk products in that they are free of the common offenders, and by common offenders I mean ingredients that more often than not present themselves in a dermatologist's office as causing skin problems, okay? So you will notice that this is discrepant from what is you may find on internet searches that you know, promote the idea that parabens are bad, that you know, sulfates are bad, that alcohol denaturant is bad. None of this actually has any relevance in dermatology and doesn't really present as a problem in the clinical setting. More often than not, the number one offender in skincare is fragrance. So I always encourage people to select moisturizers and skincare products that are free of fragrance. With regards to moisturizing sunscreens for the daytime and moisturizing the face with a moisturizing sunscreen, oftentimes, unfortunately, mineral sunscreens can be a little bit on the drying side. And by mineral sunscreens, I mean those that contain zinc or titanium dioxide. There are a variety of combination sunscreens as well that contain both zinc as well as a few UVB filters, like octinoxate. And these are a little bit more moisturizing and blend into the skin a little bit more readily. Unfortunately, the chemical sunscreens that we have here in the United States, they're decent at doing a fairly respectable job at blocking UVB and UVA rays. However, they really need to be reapplied consistently because they do degrade and their protection is not long-standing, okay? So the chemical sunscreens tend to go into vehicles and go into moisturizers that have you know, more moisturizing ingredients. They tend to be more soluble in those things, and so those moisturizers tend to be less drying, but it is really important that you reapply them throughout the day. So I will list below some moisturizing sunscreens that are good for the face that I think are fairly low risk, but again, can't predict 100% that people won't have problems to them. I will list a variety of them so that hopefully you can find one that you like, but do know that the onus is really on you to find one that you like enough and you tolerate well enough that you can continue to use comfortably. Now, as I've talked about before, as we age, our skin barrier becomes a little bit more deficient in something called ceramides. We have more of a tendency towards drier skin, okay? And that tendency towards drier skin means we tend to lose water from our skin more readily, and the dryness that results tends to kind of exacerbate the appearance of the visible signs of aging. And so people frequently ask me if I can recommend moisturizers for drier skin types and you know, quote, mature skin. And I would say that moisturizers that contain the ingredient shea butter tend to be very thick and well tolerated, non-pore clogging, although like I said, I can never predict that. And those tend to be in heavier moisturizers that people with drier skin types tend to really like. So shea butter based moisturizers are pretty good for drier skin types. Selecting moisturizers that are creams and are thicker are a good starting point. Probably one of my favorite for people to consider is the CeraVe Moisturizing Cream in the tub. It can be used on the body and the face. It's one of their least expensive products per unit, and you know, it kind of covers all surfaces, and so I like it in that manner. And it works quite well on the face. My mother, in fact, uses it on her face every night and likes it a lot. So then, you know, on the opposite kind of spectrum of that, I get many questions about moisturizers for people who are just oilier or shinier, that aren't as heavy but are moisturizing. And in that case, I recommend selecting a moisturizer that is in a lotion vehicle or a gel vehicle. And these particular vehicles, okay, I'm not talking about like active ingredients, I'm talking about the consistency of the product in terms of its water to oil ratios. Gels and lotions tend to be better accepted by oilier skin types. They have a higher amount of water, and then the water sort of evaporates, and so it's not as moisturizing. But if you're somebody who is oilier and shinier and just kind of wants to maintain your skin barrier, they may be a better choice for you. So I will list some of those down below in the description box as well. And then I get many questions about serums as moisturizers. One brand on here that's very popular that I've reviewed is The Ordinary. They take just about every ingredient in a moisturizer and they isolate it and put it in a bottle and sell it to you at a very inexpensive, seemingly inexpensive amount of money, but at the end of the day, it's like, that's already in your moisturizer. Like, why do you want it in a separate bottle? But anyway, some people are rather fond of those. I see no role for them in skincare. If you select a basic moisturizer that has those ingredients in it, then you're good, okay? And a lot of the ingredients that they tout on that website, you know, they're really not super useful. I would say, as far as ingredients that are in moisturizers that, you know, a lot of cosmetic companies are trying to sell you in individual bottles as serums, include things like hyaluronic acid that can be very helpful. Niacinamide, this is an ingredient that I talked about in a specific video last week, so if you're interested in that, I encourage you to check it out. And ceramides can be very, very helpful. They help the body make some of its own ceramides and restore the skin barrier more expeditiously. So those are things that are common in a lot of those, you know, bottled serums that are already in most drugstore moisturizers, and honestly kind of a waste because you know, you've got to put them on, and then I don't really find that they blend particularly well with the actual basic effective moisturizer. The other question that I get a ton about is using different oils, whether it be rosehip oil or, you know, a variety of facial oils before moisturizers or after moisturizers. I alluded to this in my How to Moisturize the Body video Q&A that I did a few weeks ago, but oils are not fantastic moisturizers on their own, okay, because they have kind of long tails, they're very fluid, that's why they're sort of liquid at room temperature. And they don't really properly occlude the skin enough to trap water into the skin. So they kind of just slide right off of the skin. Their role in skincare is in softening. They're emollients, okay? So the dry skin on the very top layers is dry, and the edges of the skin cells are kind of rolled up and cracked and kind of roll a little bit and give that dull appearance to the skin. Oils do a nice job softening that and smoothing the skin as they slide down, okay? But they really don't actually combat what's called transepidermal water loss, which is what I talked about in my last dry skin video. If you missed it, check it out. But they don't do a good job doing that, okay? Another ingredient in skincare that I really, really, really encourage you to avoid, and definitely avoid DIYing in your facial moisturizers, are essential oils. Essential oils are a huge problem for causing skin problems. They're very, very risky, and they're associated with many, many problems. As far as how to moisturize your face at night, I recommend starting with a clean face that you have just you know, freshly cleansed and removed dirt, oil, makeup, sunscreen. This goes for men and women because men need to be wearing sunscreen at the very least. Men may be wearing makeup as well. And so that needs to be removed to give your skin a break while you sleep, and the skin regenerates, doesn't have a lot of busy work to do, trying to get rid of all of this makeup and stuff. It can just focus on regenerating. So definitely basically take all of that crud off. And then to a wet face, you want to apply a thick moisturizer of your choosing, and that will seal the water in and plump up the skin quite nicely. And that is a good way to use a nighttime moisturizer. The daytime moisturizer gets a little bit more tricky, however, because you have to think about the sunscreen ingredients setting up properly. So in that case, you know, cleanse the face if you need to in the morning. Not everybody does, and no, it's not always necessary. But then make sure that the skin is not wet or dripping wet, that it is fairly dry. Before you put the moisturizing sunscreen on, just to not interfere with the ability of the sunscreen particles to set up and properly form a protective film. The other product that I use in my skincare routine that I get a lot of questions about is the Hada Labo Super Plumping Gel Cream. I've also used the Neutrogena Hydro Boost Extra Dry. Both of these products I love. They are both fragrance-free and contain very few ingredients that are likely to be problematic. They're just very concentrated humectants, okay? They're really thick gels that have hyaluronic acid as their humectant. Hyaluronic acid is an ingredient that binds onto water very nicely. And the way that these work really well, particularly the Hada Labo, you don't need very much of them. You really only need like a tiny little pea-sized amount, like on the tip of your pinky finger, just kind of dotted. You know, I just dot mine on the periphery of the face and just kind of blend it into a thin film, and then I come in with my moisturizer on top, and I find that this just kind of enhances the moisturizer a little bit, and it you know, kind of brightens the skin, because the hyaluronic acid kind of has these refractile properties. It can kind of help fill in some of the lines and kind of impart a brightening and youthful effect, and kind of it really does amp up your moisturizer. They're great to use at night. You can also use them in the daytime as well. Just make sure that you've put your sunscreen on first and that it's set up, and you're not putting so much of these humectants on that you're wiping off or removing sunscreen. You really only need a teeny tiny amount. So I get a ton of questions from people going through Accutane who are having quite a bit of dryness and peeling of the skin. This is a very, very common and expected side effect of Accutane, as well as other prescription systemic retinoids like Soriatane, for example, you may be taking for psoriasis. These really do dry out the skin quite a bit. It's part of you know, them working, unfortunately, is to turn over the skin and dry it out a little bit, quite a bit. Moisturizing is absolutely essential, and sunscreen is so essential, because as the skin is turning over more expeditiously, the top layer is thinning, and with the skin turnover, as the skin is thinning with skin turnover, more sun gets in and you're at risk for more sun damage. So if you are somebody who is on a retinoid, whether it be systemic or even retinoids that you apply to your face, which likewise thin the top layer of your skin, it's very, very, very critical to be using a moisturizer aggressively and a sunscreen aggressively to protect your skin and to hydrate it, okay? So if you're using a topical retinoid, whether it be Differin, generic name Adapalene, Tretinoin, brand name Retin-A, Tazarotene, Tazarac, if you're using a retinoid and you're getting a lot of peeling and dryness, you need to be using moisturizers. And the way that I use moisturizers with retinoids is I do my usual moisturizing routine to a cleansed face at night, and then I apply a small amount of my Adapalene or Differin on top of a moisturized, hydrated, dry skin. Okay, so then I apply just a tiny amount of the retinoid to my face after the moisturizer has dried. This is opposite to what the package insert will tell you. There is, you know, some providers tell their patients to do it one way, others tell them the other. There's really not a consensus. Personally, using the product myself, I find that this cuts down on irritation quite a bit. It makes the retinoids much more easy to tolerate. For people who have super dry skin that's peely, people ask me a lot about scrubs, about peels, about chemical peels to exfoliate the skin. I discourage you from doing too much of all of that. A lot of acids on the skin, a lot of peels, a lot of scrubs, exfoliants, facial brushes, you name it. Really, transiently it can sort of brighten the skin a little bit by removing some of those skin cells, but do know it's not a cure for dry skin, and more often than not what it does is exacerbate dry skin and kind of feed in on itself and cause more of a chronic problem. Also, it sets you up for an increased risk of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. It is okay to take just a gentle washcloth and just kind of, you know, with some light circles on the surface of the skin to remove it, but you don't need to be scrubbing and peeling and, you know, exfoliating. It really just, you know, kind of wreaks havoc on the skin barrier, and it's too much busy work going on, and it really can mostly just cause problems. So I think another population of people that I get many questions about moisturizing the face are those individuals who suffer from a condition called seborrheic dermatitis, which is a chronic skin condition kind of in the family of dandruff that can cause these red patches, scaly patches around kind of the nose, the forehead, the eyebrows. It can really be problematic and really make the person feel alienated when it gets quite inflamed. You know, it can really affect someone's self-esteem, as can any skin condition. And moisturizing with seborrheic dermatitis can definitely be a source of confusion. In seborrheic dermatitis, I will say that moisturizers that contain the ingredient shea butter seem to be pretty well tolerated, so much so that there is actually a prescription moisturizer that some dermatologists prescribe called Promiceb, which is shea butter based. So shea butter moisturizers seem to be fairly well tolerated in people with seborrheic dermatitis. I will say this though, if you are suffering from seborrheic dermatitis, you definitely want to avoid oil, a lot of facial oils, because seborrheic dermatitis is thought to be flared and worsened by a little yeast that naturally lives on our skin. Sorry, I had an eyelash that spazzed into my eye. A little yeast that naturally lives on our skin called Malassezia, and he thrives in kind of oily surfaces. In order to grow him in the laboratory, you actually have to put him on an overlay of, I think, peanut oil. So obviously avoiding peanut oil in your moisturizers or putting peanut oil on your face is important for seborrheic dermatitis, as well as, you know, any other kind of nut-derived oil. I would say stay back. Olive oil seems to be well tolerated, however, in seborrheic dermatitis, and has been shown to actually to be helpful to kind of soften the skin and help improve some of the scaliness. So moisturizers that contain shea butter, that contain olive oil, those are ones that seem to be helpful for seborrheic dermatitis. Then probably the other crowd of people that I get a lot of questions about, but my advice to them would kind of span a general audience as well, are the sensitive skin types. People with rosacea, people with skin allergies. In that case, I really emphasize to you all avoiding the ingredients. I really emphasize avoiding fragrance. That tends to be the #1 offender. I really emphasize avoiding essential oils in skincare. But also, likewise, caution you against the ingredient menthol or mint extract. These things that are intended to make the skin feel cool and tingly, things like peppermint extract. These may feel nice initially, but they make the skin feel that way because they kind of tickle the nerves in the skin, sometimes dilate the blood vessels in the skin, and guess what? Those are all things that contribute to the disease process of rosacea and redness in the skin and that sort of thing. So avoid those ingredients as best you're able. I know it's incredibly challenging, and everyone always wants me to come up with a list of good versus bad ingredients, and it's really hard because, to be honest with you, any ingredient applied to the face, any ingredient applied to the skin on a long-term basis can potentially, no matter how good the ingredient is, the individual can develop a sensitivity to it and become allergic to it. Any ingredient, any, okay? So there's no foolproof list. So that being said, the fewer things that you put on your face on a chronic daily basis, the better off you will be, okay? So avoiding, you know, if you can embrace the no makeup look, then that is a, you know, that bodes well in your favor for cutting down on the risk of this. If you can avoid perfumes, if you avoid fragrance, I mean, all of the fun stuff, right? Anything sold in Sephora, I mean, if you avoid putting all of that stuff on your face, you allow your skin to do its job, and you allow the skin to perform its biologic function in protecting you from the environment and tumor surveillance, and you don't, you know, bother it with all this nonsense of, you know, kind of distracting it and causing skin allergies, causing blood vessel dilation, inflammation, all of these things. It's hard. You know, we all want to look jazzy, particularly for pictures and stuff, but the less stuff you put on your face, honestly, the better off you are. You know, focus on a sunscreen for protection and a basic, a basic moisturizer with minimal ingredients, and that would be my overriding advice. But anyways, guys, I'm going to conclude the Q&A this week. I hope this video was helpful to you. Sometime in the next few weeks, I hope to post a video talking about all of the moisturizers that I've kind of tried, some that I really love, some that I'm not so fond of, and why. Just sort of a fun video on some of my favorite facial moisturizers. So stay tuned for that. I'll be coming in the next few weeks for you guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys in my next Q&A. Bye.